Hey guys, Pete here. Alright, this is going to be my recap and review of Mr. Robot Season 3, Episode 2. It was a really good episode. There will be spoilers, obviously, if you haven't watched it, so go watch something else. But yeah, it was a really, really good episode. One of my favorites. I think it becomes a little bit clearer now because I was a big fan of the slow-moving character development of Season 2. I think that in retrospect now, we see that it's trained us to not really know what to expect. And after a pretty fast-paced premiere this season, I really didn't know if we would get something this high octane right after the fact, but we did, and it worked really well. There was a lot of suspense, a healthy dose of mystery thrown in there, and a lot of stuff happened. So it kicks off with a callback, I would say, to the Season 1 montage where Elliot decides that he's just going to be normal after he thinks he gets rid of Mr. Robot the first time. We have In Excess playing in the background, new sensation, as he grooves into his new job at E Corp. We find out his whole plan is that he's going to embrace them as a necessary evil but make them better. He's transforming, the real Elliot is transforming into something new, and he believes that Mr. Robot is gone because he hasn't felt him or seen him for weeks. Of course, we find out that's not the case at all. We found that out in the premiere, that Mr. Robot's just as active as ever, and we get further confirmation of that all throughout this episode. We also find out that Darlene is what Elliot thinks is his trigger for Mr. Robot, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So if we try to break down Elliot's plan here, he's not becoming Mr. Robot, or he's not becoming the Elliot he was. He is trying to become the Elliot he thinks he needs to be. I really like that self-examination moment when he says that all of his talk about bringing them down and saving the world or changing the world was perhaps just his dorm room philosophizing. I think it was effective just for what it was. It is Elliot growing up, but I think it's also kind of the show's way of saying, look, you guys aren't getting the big picture. All the people are being critical about Elliot. He is a guy who had good intentions, but things didn't turn out the way he planned. He's not so one-dimensional. He makes sure to tell us he's not selling out, he's just growing up, and I think that that's a real important notion for us to keep in the back of our minds. The emoji stuff was pretty funny. I think it's a pretty good satire on how we communicate these days. But long story short, he seems to be pretty effective in delaying everything as far as stage 2 would be concerned. But we have to keep in mind that we know more than he does. He's not even sure if stage 2 is still in the works. He doesn't know what Tyrell's up to. He doesn't know what the Dark Army's up to. So he is doing all this stuff, but it isn't until later in the episode that he gets a real fear that stage 2 might still be going ahead without him. He does still try to make things better from the inside. He gets several people arrested after hacking them throughout E Corp. But I think this kind of points out to us that, he's trying to fix Evil Corp by rooting out these sort of systemic issues that he comes across, but he's not doing that with himself. He's avoiding Darlene, we find out later, because he thinks that might take care of Mr. Robot. But that's also pretty naive if you think about it. He's not really doing much different than what he's done in the past, and we see that come out later when we see the loneliness return. He's trying to do these sort of cosmetic fixes or simple solutions for real complex problems that are going on inside of him, and he ends up crying again and going back to Krista. I really love that callback there to the loneliness. I think that's one of the things that makes this character and this series very relatable. He's an extreme case, but that's something that we all experience at one time or another. And his obsession, you know what I mean? He's very obsessed, obviously, so much to the point that we find out that he forgot it was his birthday until he's sitting in front of Krista. So that's another window into his frame of mind, I believe. But he does sit with her and he talks to her honestly, and he tells her a little bit more about the day that he was thrown out the window, but then realizes that he never actually told her that his father did that happened. It's curious. I mean, it kind of gets glossed over because of the pace of the episode, but we haven't really seen Elliot forget something like that in this context. I mean, obviously, he manages everything that he distributes to Krista pretty carefully. He's very suspicious of the whole situation. So for him to think that he had told her, I think that's really kind of something that's important, although I don't have a good explanation of how that'll play out. But anyways, we find out that him and his sister were obsessed with Home Alone, which is interesting, that they made a snowman about Kevin McAllister, and that comes up later in the episode as well. We do get confirmation that Darlene is working with the FBI. We pretty much knew that. I mentioned that in all of my videos for episode 1. She has immunity, which is good for her. And she is trying to direct them towards Tyrell, but we also find out that she didn't know the extent of Tyrell's involvement and that the FBI actually knows a lot more than her as well. So I guess there's a lot of play of that here, who's really in control. Elliot thinks he's in control of the Mr. Robot situation. We know that's incorrect. Darlene thinks she knows what's going on with things, but the FBI is actually in control. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff going on. The big shock of the episode, of just like straight shock value, was clearly Joanna's end, her demise, which I didn't see coming. I don't think anybody else saw that coming as well. She looks like she is in total control when she goes on the TV show. We see their plans playing out just as she wanted. She's got a sympathetic ear there with the conspiracy theory crowd who are behind her. But on the way home, after saying that she still loves Tyrell, the boyfriend feels betrayed. Mr. Sutherland tries to straighten him out, but he ends up firing some shots into the car, and one of them delivers a fatal wound to Joanna. It was really, like I said, it was a shock. It was sad. I liked the character in a love-to-hate kind of way, and I'm sad to see her go. It's a bit surprising, too. I mean, she was setting her... It seemed like they were setting her up in Season 2 to be very influential throughout the rest of the story, but now she just sort of has been reduced to a pawn in the game. I mean, we see the FBI agents, we see Dom and Santiago talking, and they're, to Dom's dismay, they're using the baby, putting it in Child Protective Services as a way to try to get Tyrell out of hiding. I think they definitely put the period on the end of the sentence there when they showed the autopsy. They don't really leave much chance for her to not be dead. Usually when they extract your skull cap and scoop your brain out of your head, you're probably not in a very good chance of coming back in any way. The Krista stuff and the Darlene stuff and how it relates to Mr. Robot and the FBI is very interesting. Because of what's happened, Darlene gives them access to Elliot's screen, and we can pretty much guess that he would be onto that if Mr. Robot wasn't onto that. And we find out later that that is the case. I think it's safe to say that Darlene is definitely conflicted about doing what she's doing. She is on Elliot's side, even though her actions are counter to what F Society had done in the past. And when all of that stuff seems like, wow, that's really a lot to jam into an episode, then we get the whole Phillip Price and Whiterose situation. And I gotta tell you, I love it. We knew that B.D. Wong, who plays Whiterose, had been promoted to a series regular in the off-season. I don't think anybody was disappointed to hear that, but man, this is a good character. The showdown after Price's speech was just perfect, and I really liked this particular line that he dropped when he says, "Don't mistake my generosity for generosity." Great line, and the delivery was perfect. It was really good all the way around. For a brief overview of what's happening here, Price is trying to capitalize on the 5-9 hack by making eCoin the new world currency. They're in Turkey for the G20 summit, but we learn that China is not on board, that they're going to back Bitcoin. This obviously undermines all of Price's plan, so he's not happy about it. We know from Season 2 that they are trying to do something where China annexes the Congo. Initially, we thought that was for rare materials, and that could be part of the case, obviously. But from now in Season 3, we're a little bit more clear that Whiterose wants to move the particle collider operation from New Jersey to the mines that are there in the Congo. Price tries to dangle this in front of him, the fact that he worked on getting the UN to sign off on it, but he's quickly countered by Whiterose, who says that he basically has control of Angela. So that was really good. I'm really excited to see how that plays out. I've always liked the Phillip Price character, even though he's a total scumbag. And there's just some kind of voyeuristic thing that's really satisfying to watch these two very powerful characters. So they're going to be butting heads until something happens. And we find out that Whiterose is fairly vindictive as well. I mean, when we think of the character as being calculated, goal-oriented, not really petty, I wouldn't say. I mean, the obsession with time, everything else. But we find out that stage 2 will go through if Whiterose has anything to do with it, whether they get the Congo or not. At this point, he just wants to deliver a slap to the hand of Phillip Price. So super interesting there. So the FBI has access. Elliot sends off a file to somebody named Eugene Belford. The new character, Dom's new partner, doesn't find anything in the file. But of course, that's what Elliot wanted to have happen. That's the only thing that went out of his computer. I think it's interesting, though, that it happened at night. And this could actually be Mr. Robot operating, not Elliot himself. Either way, through the security camera, without any narration, I might add, from Elliot, we see Elliot arrive at the safe house as he was able to get the IP address or something and find their location. As Dom's looking at him, it's another callback to this idea of control. They thought that they had just made a big advance in being able to see what Elliot was up to, and now Elliot's standing in their lair. And the big question for us as viewers is it Elliot or is it Mr. Robot? I really enjoyed the conversation between Krista and Mr. Robot, come to think of that. I mean, it's the same kind of deal. Mr. Robot is someone that we think has total control over what he's doing, but we see a bit of a different side of him here. I mean, of course, he still has the same personality that differs wildly from Elliot, but he has real concern about Krista and her involvement with Elliot's life. So I think overall, I mean, this was a great episode. Totally shocked by Joanna. It had some light moments. The Elliot pitching the ideas to his bosses and doing the whole new routine, new sensation playing in the background was fun. Wondering how things are going to turn out between Whiterose and Phillip Price is definitely mysterious and exciting. I feel sad for Darlene. She is definitely between a rock and a hard place here. There were some really emotional moments with her and Elliot as brother and sister. So yeah, it had a little bit of everything and I really enjoyed it. So what I'll do next is I will do a trailer breakdown looking at the scenes from the next episode, and then I'll go back through and look at all of these Easter eggs just like I did in episode 1. There was definitely some that stood out on the first watch that I want to look into closer, so I'm going to edit this video, get it out, and then I'll move on to those other projects. Definitely tell me in the comments what you think. I mean, this season is definitely on the right track. As much as I loved season 2, I have no problems with what they're doing right now, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'm doing videos, at least 3 videos a week per episode, it looks like. So subscribe now and hit notifications so you'll know when the next one comes out. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, whichever one you like. I try to be as active as possible, and that's the best way to interact with me. And give a thought of checking out my Patreon. I could use your support, and I would love to have your input over there on the future of the channel. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon.